Hello, people. We are back. Why? I don't know. Why am I doing this? I am tired. Why am I doing this? No one has told me to stop yet. No one has told me to seek me immediate medical attention. I think that might be why I'm doing this. Why I'm putting myself through this. Even though no one else, I don't usually get that many views on this. Yeah, bye. So what's abbigale?
Her overwhelming presence on the edge of every thought fragment in my mind. Just a short while into class, I found myself looking down at my bear, now cut into 6 pieces. I felt like I was in a science lab dissecting an actual animal. The most noticeable difference being that the cotton stuffing didn't look like or stink of old flesh and death like real animals did. Later that day during lunch, due to my difference being that the cotton stuffing didn't look like or stink of old flesh and death like real animals did. Later that day during lunch, due to my mom not being able to afford buying me a cell phone, I used a payphone to call Abby but got no answer. I didn't feel like eating, so the rest of lunch I just sat on a bench outside staring at people interacting with each other. I made a major effort to distract myself knowing that focusing on what could be what was mostly a waste, considering I was so powerless to influence any change at that point. Even just watching the bushes move around the wind made more sense to me than letting worry consume me. Later that night, I had just...
Honestly, I think doing anything else makes more sense than being associated with this book. Probably. Because this is probably the worst book in existence ever written. Twilight, you get out of here. 50 Shades, you get out. You have a new champion for worst book ever.
Finished my shower, I placed the one cordless phone we had in my house next to my bed on my windowsill. I would have dialed her, but I didn't want to call more than once a day for fear of wearing out my welcome. That night, a few different calls came in, but they were always from my sister Lisa. Her receiving a barrage of phone calls from random guys was nothing new to anyone in the house. The normal conversation you could expect to hear Lisa take part in, with excessive projection in her voice, would most always revolve around how stupid she thought other girls at school were and how she hates basically everything about Lakewood High. I didn't want to know what she was talking about, ever, but my TV volume couldn't compete with her voice. It was like she thought she was so important. Everyone around her just had to hear everything she had to say, no matter how trivial the topic. After a couple hours, she finally stopped running her mouth, so I turned off my TV, and with it, my room faded to darkness. I welcomed the silence like a warm blanket on a cold night. I woke up the next morning to see the phone sitting there just like my stupid alarm clock, useless and unbearably annoying to look at. I expected it to sound off at some point, but like the clock, it failed to deliver. It was raining outside. Clouds filled in the sky in normal Lakewood fashion. I wasn't going to skate to school this time out of fear. It would rust my skates and hinder my ability to skate fast, even if at all. Instead, I decided to ride the bus, pretending for only moments I really had a choice.
Honestly, I feel like roller skating to school would be pretty fun. I mean, I would never know. I'm homeschooled.
As I climbed up the bus steps, Davis rang out, "Hallelujah! James is here to save everyone from the evil clouds!" I genuinely smiled for the first time that morning thanks to him. As usual, I sat next to...
What the flip? What the franbo? What the flippity-flop froppy?
to the window seat that Davis courteously always offered me. The beginning of history class was the same old story. As usual, I barely paid attention. I just thought about Abby and hoped she was okay. Interrupting my thoughts of Abby came a very rude outburst by Jason. It was odd to hear his voice, as I wasn't supposed to see him till art class. He stood outside our closed class door, waving his hands in hope of disrupting us. It was clearly for no real reason more meaningful than a toddler would have in invoking chaos around their immediate environment. Some people just want to get an emotional reaction to their behavior so they can feel a sense of power or control. Jason began banging.
So, what you're saying is, he's making a lot of noise, and he's being like a toddler or something, and he just wants attention. Oh, Greg, that kind of reminds me of someone. I don't know who though. Who could it be?
on the door till Mr. Hanson walked over and opened the door and asked, "Why aren't you in class?" Jason responded saying, "Got kicked out. What's up?" "Go stand outside your class till it's over."
What's up, bruh?
Mr. Hanson commanded. Jason rebelliously replied, "Don't tell me what to do, fatty." I could
You're not my dad. You're not my dad.
see Mr. Hanson was about to lose it, so I interrupted. "No one wants you here, Jason." Mr. Hanson looked back at me with a look of surprise. He seemed shocked I would say anything on his behalf. Jason became extremely silent, now refusing to look anywhere but at me. His glare was intense, but it seemed so forced, like he wasn't really offended, but didn't want to look weak in front of everyone else. Mr. Hanson then closed the door inches away from Jason's nose, but that didn't stop him from staring intensely through the vertical window slot in the door. He remained so still and consistent in his stare. It was almost as if he had become a red-faced, almost cartoonish portrait hanging on the door. As class came closer to an end, Jason was no longer staring at me and wasn't even visible from my perspective. Knowing Jason had something left to prove, many of the students naturally assumed he was somewhere within the immediate vicinity. I could tell most everyone was concerned as they kept looking back at me, wondering what I was going to do about the clearly unstable and enraged jock that no doubt was still lurking, just outside our door. Every kid in there knew I couldn't just hide out in the class. I was sure this was some kind of victory for Mr. Hanson. He knew I wouldn't have this immediate problem, and I accepted his offer to TA for him. My decisions led me to this. I built a doorway to certain destruction, and I knew if I was going to be brave, I had to just walk through it. I didn't have time to deal with hesitating once class was over. Seeing Abby was my real priority. I walked out with the class just like I normally did, only this time Jason was following close behind, as I'm sure most everyone assumed he would. I was about to leave the main building to head over to the art trailer, only to feel a hand grab my shoulder. The hand slipped as I pulled away, nails scraping along my skin to clamp my shirt. I was then yanked swiftly back from the main hall door. It began. I yanked my shirt aggressively out of his hand and clutched my now scratched up shoulder. I was now facing Jason, who immediately lunged at me and threw me into the already half-broken hall door just behind me.
I'm just gonna cut through this fight, cause honestly, I was not paying attention.
I was knocked to the ground within seconds, and he began trying to pull off my backpack,
Another cut.
As my nose began to bleed, one of the boys my sister was friends with, Matthew, grabbed me and pulled me out of the fight. He was twice my size, but was also on Jason's football team, so naturally he did nothing to help me win. The only thing he offered me was an end to the beating I was suffering. Shortly after the fight ended, I found myself sitting on a mattress in the nurse's office, not allowed to leave, not allowed to do anything but think about what happened. Despite everything in my head feeling scrambled and disorganized, there was Abby, waiting in the same place, just as she sat in the back of the class.
That's like my new microphone.
Warmly in the back of my mind.
I
As lunch
like
approached,
it.
Principal Lehman came into the room I was staying in at the nurse's office and asked me how I was feeling. I responded, "Well, my tooth is chipped, my chin hurts, my face is bruised, and I just got humiliated in front of my peers." Mr. Lehman said, "I've gotten multiple statements saying you pushed him. What's your response?" I replied, "I pushed him back after he pushed me first. All I did was push him back once, and then he did this to my face." I made a circular motion around my face, showing how one-sided the fight way. Principal Lehman said in a commanding voice, "Well, he's suspended for 10 days. He paused, and I felt a relief assuming the principal was on my side, but then he continued, "You will be suspended for 2 days. I was surprised.
Let me think. Is that logical? Probably not. So, he started the fight. And obviously got beat up. Like, just... None of this book makes sense. I'm just stupid.
They would suspend someone for just pushing back when they are pushed. What was I supposed to do? Just ignore being assaulted? If the school is meant to teach us how to survive in the real world, and in the real world you are legally allowed to defend yourself, how could they justify this punishment? Principal Lehman informed me I could finish up the day and not return for the following 2 days. You should be at least grateful for that. Jason was escorted off the school grounds immediately. He said. Principal Lehman stared at me sitting there, helpless and about to break down. Okay, then see you again in a few days, he said and quickly walked out. All I could focus on feeling in that moment was the tacky ice pack on his face and a sinking feeling of worthlessness. It's not something I like to admit, but the truth is I cried seconds after Principal Lehman left the room. The type of cry you suppress, but your eyes still become red. It trembles and painfully hot tears still fall. It was the type of sadness that made a person ache to their core, but you do your best to hold on, to not lose yourself to your emotions like you would so carelessly do as a child. I sat in the room alone till I could collect myself. Shortly after I gathered myself to see
Like
I also
that?
asked a couple of my teachers about
Did
any
you
work
cry
I
like
would miss,
that?
so I could keep up while I was suspended, but didn't have the motivation to stop by every single class before leaving the school entirely. As I was about to get on the bus home, I looked over to see Abby again in the parking lot with her boyfriend Seth. They were standing by his car. This time they were not showing affection.
It
In
was
fact,
a
it seemed like he wasn't even willing to look at
Nissan
him, despite him clearly and aggressively speaking to her. Without a second's thought, I shifted away from the bus and began walking over to Abby to see if she was okay. The more I could hear Seth's tone as I approached, the more worried I became.
Hey guys, would
Seth
you like
reacted to me like a guard
for
dog
me
in
to
a
bring
ghetto
my
fenced
hedgehog
yard once he
with,
realized I was headed
one of
towards
these
him.
videos?
He puffed out his shoulders and glared at me in
I
attempts
mean,
to look
like,
intimidating.
you wouldn't be
Abby
able to
remained
see
upset.
her, but
It seemed
you'll
like she was
hear her,
emotionally
probably.
unable to look anywhere but the ground. Now within a
Please,
fair speaking
just
range,
comment.
I tried to sound
I need to
optimistic
know,
for the sake of
is this-
Abby's emotional
Is this worth
state.
it?
Hey Abby, were you
Let
at
me
art
know
class
if
today?
I
I
please.
asked. Her boyfriend
Let me
stepped in front of her
know.
to block my view and said,
Oh,
"Are you the kid that
gosh.
called her the other night?" I responded. "Yeah, just ignore him, James."
Go
Abby
burp.
mumbled loudly behind Seth. Seth looked back as if an arrow had just been plunged into his chest. Abby then walked around him, looking
Excuse
only
me.
at me, and
Sorry.
said,
Not
"Will
really.
you walk me?"
I just did
Or
that straight
paused
into
when
the
she saw my
microphone.
face. Abby's facial expression changed quickly to shock as she asked
Oh,
in an
gosh.
alarmed tone, "What happened?" Her boyfriend busted out laughing. "Oh, you didn't see this idiot get wrecked by Jason? He didn't even fight back. I would have had that jock prick choking in his own blood in seconds, but you just took a beating like a—" Abby interrupted, screaming, "Shut up, Seth, you sadistic freak!"
One argument later.
He let his voice reach her with his screams.
Is there another burp
"You
coming?
have no respect after what I've done for you?" Abby replied. "I'm sick of this, Seth. I want nothing to do with you." Her voice cracked as if Seth screamed once more.
Oh, is there an argument
"If you're ending this
going
again,
on?
He didn't know what to say, but in his eyes I could see a deep, intense hatred. When I looked in most people's eyes, I saw all kinds of things, but in him there was only anger and pain. His hands were shaking furiously, his breathing noticeably irregular. He was losing it. Abby still refused to look at Seth as he threw his tantrum. He yelled, "Fine! Be a guy who can't even protect himself, idiot!" Seth got into his car as Abby tightly grabbed my arm. Her eyes remained closed like she was scared, hiding in a shell. She jumped at the sound of Seth slamming his car door. Recklessly, Seth floored the gas pedal and his car lurched forward, barely missing
Right off
Abby
a cliff.
and me
Oh, I
as he
hit
pulled
my-
out of the
I
parking
hit-
lot.
I hit my-
Abby stood
my
silently
hand
by
on
with
the-
her eyes still
on
closed.
on
I didn't know how to
something.
act in a situation like this. Trying not to make things worse, I just said, "I will walk you home," to answer your question. Abby opened her eyes, but
Walk you
remained silent.
home,
She nodded.
human.
We had been walking for a while, every step making us feel like we were slightly further from our problems. She finally spoke. "So, I was in art class and I saw your cut-up bear." I responded, "Yeah, creepy, right? Maybe it was a foobar idea." She laughed a little. "Yeah, I guess we're both kind of weird. I was all game for it." I softly laughed as I began to feel raindrops hitting my arms and neck. "I hear running is just as bad as walking in the rain," I said. "You get just as wet?" She replied, "Yeah, something like that. It's like the harder you try to fix some problems, the worse they get."
Oh no. Oh, I know what comes up next. Oh, I know what's gonna happen. Oh gosh. Let me know if you want more. Okay, bye.